He's not dead. A waitress stopped the Vampire King's funeral. What happened next shocked everyone. "Put the lid down," the priest commanded, his voice shaking against the thunder rolling over Nightcrest. "No," Marielle whispered, the silver tray trembling in her hands. Then, louder, sharp enough to cut through the weeping rain and the droning organ music. "No, stop!" The entire cathedral froze. 500 pale faces turned. "He's not dead," Marielle shouted, stepping over the velvet rope, ignoring the gasp of the crowd and the guards reaching for their swords. She pointed a shaking finger at the marble dais where the most feared predator in the kingdom lay. "I saw him move. The king, he's breathing." The kingdom of Nightcrest did not mourn like the human world. There were no sobbing widows or bouquets of wilting lilies. Here, death was a bureaucracy, a transfer of power, a cold calculation of bloodlines. The funeral of King Ambrose Greyhaven was less a farewell and more a coronation for his successor. Marielle Thornford smoothed the front of her uniform, the scratchy black wool clinging to her skin in the humid, storm-charged air. She was nobody here, a server hired from the lower ward to pass flutes of crimson wine to aristocrats who looked at her as if she were the appetizer. The Cathedral of St. Jude was a cavernous beast of stone and stained glass, currently packed with the apex predators of the continent. At the center of it all lay Ambrose. Even in death, or what passed for it, the Vampire King was terrifyingly beautiful. His skin was the color of moonlight on snow, his raven hair swept back from a face that looked carved from marble. He wore his military dress, the high collar framed by silver embroidery. He looked peaceful, which was the only thing about him that felt like a lie. Ambrose Greyhaven was known for many things: cruelty, justice, tactical genius, but never peace. "More wine, girl," a sharp voice snapped. Marielle jolted, turning to find Celestia Lakewood glaring at her. The Duchess was a vision in midnight blue silk, her eyes red-rimmed, not from tears, but perhaps from the stress of political maneuvering. "Apologies, Your Grace," Marielle murmured, pouring the vintage with a steady hand despite her nerves. "Look at him," Celestia hissed to her companion, Vincent Greycastle. Vincent was the king's younger brother, the man who stood to inherit the crown within the hour. He was handsome in a softer, more fluid way than Ambrose, with a smile that didn't quite reach his predatory eyes. "He looks like he's merely sleeping off a bad vintage." "The poison was thorough, Celestia," Vincent replied, his voice a velvet purr. "The physicians of the Vale confirmed it. His heart has turned to stone. It is done." Marielle backed away, blending into the shadows of a pillar. She shouldn't have heard that. Poison. The official story was a hunting accident, a rogue werewolf pack. But in Nightcrest, the official story was usually just a fairy tale for the gullible. She was supposed to return to the kitchens, but something pulled her toward the dais. The viewing was ending. The heavy lid of the glass and lead coffin was being hoisted by 4 hulking guards. The high priest, a withered vampire named Philomena Frosthall, was chanting the rites of severance. Marielle found herself at the edge of the velvet rope. She had never been this close to royalty. Up close, Ambrose looked less like a monster and more like a tragedy. There was a scar running through his left eyebrow, a tiny imperfection that made him jarringly real. Thunder cracked directly overhead, shaking the cathedral foundations. The lightning flash illuminated the dais in stark, blinding white. In that split second of brilliance, Marielle saw it. A patch of fog. It was faint, no larger than a coin, appearing on the underside of the glass lid, directly above Ambrose's lips. Condensation. Breath. The lightning faded, returning the room to the gloom of candlelight, but the image was seared into Marielle's mind. Vampires didn't breathe. Not really. Not unless they were healing. not unless they were alive. Philomena raised her staff. We commit Ambrose Greyhaven to the eternal void. Let the lid be sealed. The guards moved to lower the heavy stone casing over the glass. If they sealed it, he would suffocate. Even an immortal needed air to recover from a coma. If they buried him now, he would wake up in the dark, clawing at stone until he went mad or starved. Marielle didn't think. The tray of empty glasses she was holding crashed to the floor, the sound shattering the solemn silence like a gunshot. Stop! The word tore out of her throat. Every head turned. The silence was absolute, heavy with the weight of 100 centuries of etiquette being violated. Vincent Greycastle stepped forward, his expression shifting from annoyance to amusement. A clumsy server. Remove her. He's not dead! Marielle scrambled over the velvet rope. Her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. I saw it. There was breath on the glass. He's breathing. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. Tanith Ironcrest, the captain of the Royal Guard, frowned, her hand drifting to the hilt of her sword. The human is hysterical, Philomena stated coldly. The king is gone. Remove this filth. Two guards seized Marielle's arms. Their grip was like iron vices. Look at the glass, Marielle screamed, thrashing against them. She locked eyes with Vincent. For a second, the mask slipped, and she saw genuine panic in his gaze. He knew. Vincent knows. Look at the glass. Silence her, Vincent commanded, his voice dropping the velvet facade. Now. One of the guards raised a gauntleted fist. Marielle flinched, closing her eyes, expecting the blow that would likely break her jaw. Thump. It wasn't the sound of a fist hitting flesh. It was a heavy, dull thud from inside the coffin. The guard froze. The cathedral fell silent again, so quiet you could hear the rain sizzling against the stained glass windows. Thump. A hand, pale, scarred and trembling, slammed against the inside of the glass lid. Marielle gasped, sagging in the guard's grip. Ambrose's eyes were open. They weren't the serene, dead eyes of a corpse. They were wide, blood-red, and burning with a terrifying feral rage. He was looking straight up, disoriented, suffocating, and furious. Gods above, Tanith Ironcrest whispered, drawing her sword not against Marielle, but stepping between the coffin and Vincent. The coffin lid shifted. The locks groaned. Ambrose was pushing. He's a ghoul, Vincent shouted, his composure shattering. The poison corrupted his mind. He's a revenant. Kill it before he slaughters us all. No. Marielle bit the hand of the guard holding her. He yelped and released her. She didn't run away. She ran forward. She grabbed the latch of the glass coffin. It was cold, slippery with humidity. Don't! Celestia shrieked. Marielle threw the latch. The pressure from inside did the rest. The glass lid exploded outward, shattering into 1,000,000 diamonds that rained down on the marble floor. Ambrose Greyhaven sat up. Shards of glass slid from his uniform. He gasped, a ragged, terrible sound, like air rushing into a vacuum. He looked around, wild and dazed, until his gaze landed on the only person standing within arm's reach. Marielle. He lunged. The speed of a vampire king was a blur, a glitch in reality. One moment Ambrose was in the coffin. The next, he was on top of Marielle, pinning her to the cold stone steps of the dais. The crowd screamed. Guards rushed forward, spears lowered. Marielle stared up into the face of death. Ambrose's hands were clamped onto her shoulders, his grip bruising. His fangs were descended, sharp and glinting in the candlelight. He was starving. She could smell the decay of the poison sweating out of his pores, mixing with the scent of ozone and old blood. But he didn't bite. He hovered inches from her neck, his chest heaving. His pupils were blown wide, encompassing the iris, turning his eyes into black pools. He was trembling violently. "Wait!" he rasped. His voice was like grinding stones. "Wait! Your Majesty!" Tanith Ironcrest bellowed, shoving her way through the confused perimeter guards. "Stand down! Everyone stand down!" Vincent drew a jagged ceremonial dagger. "He is mad. He is turning feral. I will end his suffering." Vincent lunged for his brother's exposed back. Ambrose didn't even look. He simply backhanded the air. The blow connected with Vincent's chest, sending the usurper flying 40 feet across the cathedral to crash into the choir stalls. Wood splintered, and Vincent groaned, crumpling to the floor. The display of raw power froze everyone. Even half dead, Ambrose was stronger than any 3 vampires in the room combined. Ambrose looked down at Marielle again. The feral haze in his eyes was receding, replaced by confusion and pain. He looked at her pulse point, then up to her eyes. "You," he whispered. "You screamed." "I did," Marielle managed to squeak, her terror warring with a strange, magnetic pull. He was heavy, but he wasn't crushing her. He was bracing himself. "Why?" "Because you were breathing," she said simply. Ambrose's eyes narrowed. He looked past her, scanning the room, the priests, the terrified nobles, his groaning brother. The realization hit him. The funeral, the coffin, the betrayal. His body went rigid. He tried to stand, but his legs failed him. The poison, the withers, was still in his system, eating his motor functions. He collapsed, his head landing on Marielle's shoulder. "Get him off her," Tanith ordered. "No, touch him and he'll kill you." Theodore Whitshaw, the royal physician, rushed forward. "He's in a waking coma. His instincts are strictly defensive. If you pull him, he snaps." "He needs blood," Philomena Frosthall said, her voice dripping with malice. "He is starving. If he feeds on the girl, he will kill her. Let him. It will prove he is a monster, unfit to rule." Ambrose groaned against Marielle's neck. He was burning up. "Help me up," he gritted out. The words meant only for her. Marielle hesitated. She was a waitress. She made minimum wage. This was a king who could tear her throat out by accident. But she remembered the fog on the glass. She remembered Vincent's smile. "Okay," she whispered. She wrapped her arms around his torso. It was like hugging a statue. On 3. 1, 2, 3. She heaved, and surprisingly, Ambrose pushed with her. They stood up together, swaying dangerously. Marielle became his crutch, her small frame straining under his weight. "Everyone back," Tanith shouted, forming a protective ring around them with her loyalists. Vincent was being helped up by Celestia. He wiped blood from his mouth, his eyes murderous. "Arrest them," Vincent spat. "The girl is a witch. She has necromanced a corpse." "He is the king," Tanith roared, pointing her sword at Vincent. "And he is awake. By the laws of blood, the succession is void." "He is compromised," Vincent countered. "Look at him. He can barely stand." "Take me." "To the tower," Ambrose whispered to Marielle. "We can't get through that crowd," Marielle hissed back. "Tanith," Ambrose said, his voice gaining a fraction of strength. The captain of the guard snapped to attention. "Sire." "Clear. The hall." Tanith didn't hesitate. She turned to her soldiers. "Form a phalanx. Escort the king to the royal wing. Anyone who blocks the path is a traitor to the crown and will be executed instantly." The room erupted into chaos. Loyalties fractured in real time, but the sight of the resurrected king, leaning on a waitress in a stained uniform, was enough to make the majority hesitate. They moved. Marielle, half carrying the ruler of Nightcrest, walked down the center aisle. She could feel the heat radiating off him. He was smelling her hair, her skin. It was terrifying, yet he kept his jaw clenched tight, fighting the hunger. "Don't let me fall," he murmured, his grip on her waist tightening. "I've got you," Marielle said, surprised to find she meant it. They reached the heavy oak doors of the vestry. As they passed Vincent, the brothers locked eyes. "This isn't over, Ambrose," Vincent whispered. Ambrose didn't speak. He just bared his fangs in a smile that was all promise and no joy. The royal wing was a fortress within a fortress. Once the heavy iron door slammed shut, the noise of the cathedral faded to a dull roar. They brought him to the solar, a massive room filled with maps, weapons, and a roaring fireplace. Theodore Whitshaw immediately began barking orders at the servants to bring blood packs and warming blankets. Marielle tried to step away once they reached the velvet chaise lounge, but Ambrose refused to let go of her wrist. "Sire, please," Theodore said gently. "Let the girl go. We need to stabilize you." "No," Ambrose said. His eyes were closed, his head thrown back against the cushions. "She stays." "She's a civilian, Ambrose," Tanith said, pacing the room. "We need to secure the perimeter. Vincent has half the council in his pocket. He'll claim you're mentally unstable and try to invoke the Regency Act. He tried to bury me." "Alive," Ambrose said, each word a labor. He opened his eyes and looked at Marielle. "You saw the breath?" "Yes," Marielle said, rubbing her wrist where his grip had left red marks. "Why?" "Why what? Why did you look? Everyone else saw a corpse. You saw a man." "I have good eyes," Marielle said defensively. "And I didn't want you to die. You don't even know me. I know you tip the service staff well at the winter solstice banquets," she said. "And I know your brother is a snake. I serve his table often. He kicks dogs when he thinks no one is looking." A dry, raspy chuckle escaped Ambrose's lips. "He does. He really does." Suddenly, Ambrose arched his back, a hiss of pain escaping his teeth. His veins turned black, visible through his pale skin. "The withers is spiking," Theodore said, panic rising in his voice. "The adrenaline is wearing off. His heart is stopping again. I need O negative immediately. Where are the blood packs?" "The stores were emptied for the funeral feast," a servant stammered, terrified. "Vincent," Tanith cursed. "He drained the reserve so you couldn't heal if you did wake up." Ambrose began to convulse. His grip on the chaise tore the fabric. He was dying for real this time. Theodore looked at Marielle, then at Tanith. "We don't have time to source a donor," Theodore said grimly. "He needs fresh blood. Now, or he slips back into torpor and we never wake him up." All eyes turned to Marielle. She backed up until she hit a bookshelf. "No, absolutely not. I'm just the waitress. I'm the whistleblower. I'm not the lunch." "Girl," Tanith said, stepping forward. "I can order you." "No orders," Ambrose gasped. He was shaking violently. "Let her leave." Marielle looked at him. He was in agony. He was the king of the night, the monster in the bedtime stories, and he was choosing to die rather than force her. She looked at the door. She could run. She could disappear into the rain and go back to her studio apartment and her cat. But Vincent would hunt her down. She had humiliated him. She was a loose end. Her only safety was this man. Marielle took a deep breath. She unbuttoned the cuff of her left sleeve and rolled it up. "Do I get a raise?" she asked, her voice trembling. Theodore's shoulders sagged in relief. "Name your price, my dear." "Hazard pay and protection." She walked over to the chaise. Ambrose looked at her arm, then at her face. The hunger in his eyes was terrifying, a raw, primal force. "I might not be able to stop." "Then Tanith will stop you," Marielle said, looking at the captain. Tanith nodded, hand on her sword hilt. Marielle sat on the edge of the chaise. She extended her wrist. Ambrose didn't grab her. He took her hand gently, almost reverently. His skin was ice cold, hers was warm. He brought her wrist to his mouth. "I am sorry," he whispered against her skin. Then he bit. The pain was sharp, immediate, and shocking. Marielle gasped, gripping the back of the chaise, but as he drank, the pain dulled into a strange, numbing pressure. She watched him. The colour began to return to his face instantly. The grey pallor vanished, replaced by a flush of life. The black veins receded. His hair seemed to shine darker. He was drinking deep, desperate gulps. "That's enough, sire," Tanith warned. Ambrose growled low in his throat, a warning sound. He tightened his grip. "Ambrose!" Theodore shouted. Marielle felt light-headed. The room swam. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, big guy, that's enough." She put her free hand on the back of his head. His hair was soft. She gently tugged. Miraculously, he pulled away. He gasped, blood staining his lips, his chest heaving. He looked drunk, powerful, and terrifyingly alive. He licked a drop of blood from his lip, his eyes locking onto hers with an intensity that made her toes curl. "Marielle," he said. It was the first time he had used her name. His voice was no longer raspy. It was deep, rich, and commanding. Theodore rushed in to bandage her wrist. "You did well. Remarkably well." Ambrose sat up, swinging his legs off the chaise. He stood, and this time he didn't sway. He towered over them all. The power in the room shifted instantly. The air felt heavier, charged with static. "Tanith," Ambrose said. "Seal the castle. No one leaves. No one enters." "And Vincent? Let him run," Ambrose said darkly. "Let him think he has escaped. The hunt is better when the prey has a head start." He turned to Marielle. She was sitting on the chaise, holding a juice box the physician had shoved into her hands, looking pale and small. Ambrose knelt. The King of Nightcrest, the scourge of the north, went down on one knee before a waitress. He took her bandaged hand. "You saved me twice," he said. "Once with your voice, and once with your blood. I just didn't want the funeral to be boring," she joked weakly. Ambrose didn't smile. He looked at her with a terrifying solemnity. "You are under my protection now, Marielle Thornford. You are no longer a servant of this court." "What am I, then?" "You are the keeper of the king's life," he declared. "And tonight we have a kingdom to reconquer." He stood up and offered her his hand. "Are you ready to ruin a coronation?" Marielle looked at his hand. It was stained with her blood. She looked at the door where the storm was raging outside. She took his hand. "Lead the way." The hallway leading to the throne room was a gauntlet of shadows and silent judgment. Every tapestry seemed to watch them. Every suit of armor looked ready to animate and strike. Marielle walked on Ambrose's left, her hand still firmly gripped in his. To the casual observer, the terrified servants pressing themselves against the stone walls, the guards snapping to rigid attention, it looked like the king was leading her. A romantic, if bizarre, gesture. But Marielle knew the truth. She was the only thing keeping him upright. Ambrose was a monolith of will, but his physical body was failing. The blood she had given him was a temporary battery, a flare of energy that was already flickering. His weight leaned heavily against her shoulder, disguised by the heavy velvet of his funeral cloak, which he had draped over both of them. "Chin up," Ambrose murmured, his lips barely moving. "Look at no one. You are above them now." "I'm wearing orthopedic shoes and an apron," Marielle whispered back, her heart hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. "I'm not above anyone." "You are alive," Ambrose countered, his voice tight with pain. "In this castle, that is a rare privilege." They reached the massive double doors of the throne room. Tanith Ironcrest stepped forward, her armor stained with the blood of a few loyalists who had hesitated too long. She kicked the doors open. "King Ambrose Greyhaven," she bellowed. "First of his name, Scourge of the North, returned from the void." The throne room was not empty. Vincent had fled, but the viper's nest remained. The High Council, 12 ancient vampires who managed the bureaucracy of Nightcrest, sat around the circular obsidian table below the dais. They froze as Ambrose entered. The air in the room dropped 10 degrees. Ambrose released Marielle's hand and stepped away from her. It was a terrifying gamble. If he stumbled, if he showed even a tremor of weakness, the council would tear him apart. They were opportunists, sharks circling a wounded whale. Ambrose walked. His stride was slow, deliberate. Thud, thud, thud. He didn't walk to the table. He walked to the dais, ascending the stairs to the Iron Throne, a seat of fused swords and blackened steel that looked incredibly uncomfortable. He sat, not with a sigh of relief, but with the heavy, settling weight of a mountain. He stared down at the council. He didn't speak. He just let the silence stretch, heavy and suffocating, until one of the councillors, a thin man with skin like parchment, began to fidget. "Your Majesty," the councillor stammered, We were told you had passed." The physicians were wrong," Ambrose said. His voice echoed off the vaulted ceiling. "Obviously." He gestured to Marielle, who was standing awkwardly by the door. "Come." Marielle froze. Every eye in the room swiveled to her. She wanted to melt into the floorboards. But she saw the slight tension in Ambrose's jaw, the white-knuckle grip he had on the armrest. He needed her close. She walked up the aisle, the sound of her rubber soles squeaking slightly on the polished marble. It was the longest walk of her life. She ascended the dais and stood at his right hand. "This is Marielle Thornford," Ambrose announced. "She saw what you did not. She heard what you ignored. As of this moment, she is the keeper of the life. Her word is my voice. Her safety is the safety of the crown." Celestia Lakewood, who had remained behind when Vincent fled, stood up. She looked composed, though her hands were trembling. "A human, sire?" she asked, her voice dripping with disdain. "A servant? Is this wise? The peerage will revolt. They will say the poison affected your mind." Ambrose leaned forward. The candlelight caught the feral red of his eyes. "Let them revolt," he snarled softly. "I am hungry, Celestia, and a revolt sounds like a feast." The threat was naked and terrifying. Celestia paled and sat down. "Where is my brother?" Ambrose demanded. He left via the Shadow Gate, sire," Tanith reported, stepping up to the dais. "He took the West Garrison with him. We are effectively under siege from within our own borders." "He will blockade the food supplies," Ambrose analyzed instantly. "He knows I am weak. He wants to starve the castle out." "We have the reserves," Tanith said. "No," Ambrose corrected. "We have nothing. Vincent drained the blood bank. We have wine, we have water, and we have the staff." A heavy silence fell over the room. The implication hung in the air. "The staff are food." Marielle stepped forward, surprising herself. "We have the greenhouses." Ambrose looked up at her, eyebrows raised. "The hydroponic gardens in the East Wing," Marielle said, her voice gaining strength. "They grow synthetic hemoglobins for the vegetarian faction of the court. Vincent wouldn't have destroyed them. He thinks they're useless weeds. But if we can refine the output—" "Synthetic blood is swill," Celestia scoffed. "It keeps you alive, but it grants no power." "Survival first," Ambrose said, cutting her off. He looked at Marielle with a spark of genuine respect. "Power later. Tanith, secure the greenhouses. Marielle will supervise the harvest." "Me?" Marielle squeaked. "You're the only one here who knows what labor looks like," Ambrose said dryly. Then his face went slack. The mask slipped. He slumped sideways in the throne. "Sire!" Tanith lunged. Ambrose caught himself, but barely. He looked at Marielle, his eyes pleading. The energy from her donation was gone. "Clear the room!" he rasped. "But sire, the strategy," Celestia began. "Out!" Ambrose roared. The sound was a physical blow, cracking the marble floor at the base of the dais. The council scrambled over each other to leave. The doors slammed shut. Ambrose slid off the throne, collapsing onto the cold stone steps. Marielle was there instantly, catching his head in her lap. He was shivering, burning up again. "It's not enough," he whispered, clutching her apron. "The poison. It fights the blood. It consumes it." "I'll give you more," Marielle said, reaching for her sleeve. "No." Ambrose stopped her hand. His grip was weak. "Too much. And you die. Then I am truly alone." "Then what do we do?" Marielle asked, tears pricking her eyes. She was terrified, not of him, but for him. "We endure," Ambrose gritted out. "Get me to the tower. The sun is rising, and when the sun rises, the ghosts come out." The king's chambers were not what Marielle expected. She anticipated black velvet, skulls, and opulence. Instead, Ambrose's private sanctuary was stark, almost monastic. The walls were lined with books, thousands of them, and the only furniture was a massive four-poster bed and a desk buried under tactical maps. Theodore Whitshaw had stabilized him with a cocktail of adrenaline and the last dregs of a hidden emergency stash. But Ambrose was still bedridden. It had been 6 hours since the funeral. Outside, the storm had passed, leaving a heavy grey dawn over Nightcrest. Marielle sat in a wingback chair by the fireplace, watching the king sleep. She should be sleeping too. She was exhausted down to her bones, but her mind was racing. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the fog on the glass. She felt the phantom pressure of his teeth on her wrist. And there was something else. A hum. A low, vibrating thrum in the back of her skull. It wasn't a sound. It was a feeling, like a compass needle pointing north, and north was the man in the bed. "You're thinking too loud," a voice rasped from the bed. Marielle jumped. Ambrose was watching her. He looked better, the grey pallor replaced by the alabaster stillness of his kind. "Sorry," she said. "I didn't know telepathy was on the menu." "It's not telepathy, it's the bond." Ambrose sat up slowly, wincing as he adjusted the pillows. He was shirtless, his chest wrapped in bandages. "You gave freely. That is rare. Usually, blood is taken or bought. A gift creates a tether. Is that why I feel like I know where you are even when I'm not looking at you?" "Yes, and I can feel you. Your fear. Your exhaustion. Your curiosity." Marielle blushed. "So I'm basically a human GPS tracker." Ambrose offered a faint, tired smile. It transformed his face, softening the harsh angles. "You are a lighthouse in a dark ocean, Marielle." He swung his legs out of bed. "You should rest," she scolded, standing up. "I have been dead for 3 days. I have rested enough." He walked to the window, keeping to the shadows. The heavy drapes were drawn, blocking the lethal sunlight. "Tell me, Marielle, why do you work in the scullery? You speak with the diction of a scholar, and you identified a tactical resource, the greenhouse, faster than my generals." Marielle hesitated. "My father was a professor at the University of Solara. Before the purge." Ambrose stiffened. "The human purge. That was Vincent's doing. I was indisposed on the northern front." "You were king," Marielle said quietly. "It happened in your name." Ambrose turned to face her. The regret in his eyes was deep and ancient. "It did, and it is a stain I cannot wash out. I returned and put a stop to it, but the damage was done. Your father, exiled. He died in the borderlands. I had to drop out of the academy and take a job that paid under the table, serving wine to the people who signed his deportation order. And yet, Ambrose stepped closer, stopping just inches from her. You saved the life of the man who wore the crown. I told you." Marielle looked up at him, refusing to flinch. I saw a breathing man, not a king, just a man suffocating in a box. I couldn't let it happen. Ambrose reached out, his cold fingers grazing her cheek. The touch sent a jolt of electricity through her that made her knees weak. The connection, the hum in her head, spiked, turning into a roar of shared emotion. She felt his immense loneliness, a century of isolation, and a sudden, overwhelming gratitude. "You are dangerous, Marielle Thornford," he whispered. "You make me feel human." The moment was shattered by a heavy knock on the door. "Sire!" It was Tanith. "You need to see this. The courtyard." Ambrose's face hardened instantly. The vulnerable man vanished. The king returned. He grabbed a silk robe and pulled it on. "Stay here." "No," Marielle said, grabbing a letter opener from his desk as a makeshift weapon. "Keeper of the life, remember? Where you go, I go." Ambrose looked at the letter opener, then at her determined face. He smirked. "Very well. But stay behind me." They followed Tanith down the spiraling stone stairs to a balcony overlooking the internal courtyard of the castle. The scene below was a nightmare. The courtyard was filled with birds. Thousands of dead ravens covered the cobblestones like a black carpet. They had fallen from the sky, their bodies twisted. But that wasn't the message. In the center of the carnage, the birds had been arranged, piled high to form words visible from the balcony. "Rot, brother." "Biological warfare," Theodore Whitshaw muttered, covering his nose with a handkerchief as he inspected a carcass. These birds didn't just die. They were carriers. The wither's poison. It's airborne now. Ambrose gripped the stone railing until it cracked. "He's not trying to starve us out," Ambrose realized, his voice cold. "He's trying to plague us out. He wants to turn the castle into a tomb." He turned to Marielle. "The greenhouse," he said urgently. "The air filtration system for the hydroponics. It's independent from the rest of the castle, isn't it?" "Yes," Marielle nodded, her mind racing. "It has its own scrubbers." "Tanith," Ambrose barked. "Move, everyone, the staff, the guards, the court, to the east wing. Seal the rest of the castle. We retreat to the gardens." "Sire, that's a tactical dead end," Tanith argued. "If he breaches the glass, we're trapped. If we stay here, we breathe the poison and die within the hour," Ambrose countered. "Move, now!" As the castle erupted into panic, Ambrose grabbed Marielle's arm. "The bond," he said. "Can you feel it?" "Feel what?" "The poison. It's not just in the air. It's calling to something." Marielle focused on the hum in her head. Underneath Ambrose's presence, there was a second signal. Faint, discordant, and malicious. "Someone is controlling it," she whispered, eyes widening. "It's not just chemistry. It's magic. There's a sorcerer guiding the cloud." "Vincent doesn't have magic," Ambrose said grimly. "He has money. He bought a warlock." "We have to find the source," Marielle said, "or the scrubbers won't matter. Magic will eat through the filters." "Then we hunt," Ambrose said. "But not outside. The signal is coming from inside the walls." The east wing was a marvel of glass and steel, a humidity-controlled jungle of ferns and bioluminescent flowers. Now it was a refugee camp, aristocrats in silk pajamas huddled next to kitchen staff in stained aprons. The social hierarchy of Nightcrest had been flattened by the universal equalizer, the fear of death. Ambrose had set up a command post in the tool shed. It was absurd and fitting. The king stood over a map spread out on a potting bench, while Marielle handed out filtered water to the guards. "The signal is getting stronger," Marielle said, pressing her hand to her temple. The hum was becoming a headache. "It's pulsing, like a heartbeat. Triangulate it," Ambrose commanded. "Close your eyes. Point." Marielle did. She spun slowly, blocking out the noise of crying children and arguing dukes. She followed the discordant thread of magic. She stopped, pointing toward the floor. "Down," she said. "Below us." "The crypts," Tanith said, sharpening her sword. "The old kings. No one has been down there in centuries." "Vincent must have planted the beacon before he fled," Ambrose said. "A hex bag or a totem, pumping the poison into the ventilation shafts." "I'll take a squad," Tanith said. "No," Ambrose shook his head. "The crypts are shielded against vampires, ancient wards. If you go down there, you'll burn. Only a direct descendant of the line can enter without triggering the defenses." "So you," Marielle said. "Me?" Ambrose nodded. "And a human," he looked at Marielle. "Because the wards ignore humans," she guessed. "Because the wards consider humans to be livestock, and therefore not a threat," Ambrose corrected gently. "It's insulting but useful. Great, I'm an invisible cow. Let's go." They took a service elevator down to the sub-basement. The air grew colder, the smell of ozone and rot intensifying. The hum in Marielle's head was now a scream. They stepped out into a corridor of rough-hewn stone, the crypts of the Greyhaven line. "Stay close," Ambrose warned. He was moving slower again. The clean air of the greenhouse was behind them. Down here, the poison was seeping in. His strength was fading. They reached the main burial chamber. It was a vast, circular room, lined with stone sarcophagi. In the center stood a statue of the first king, holding a bowl of eternal fire. But the fire wasn't orange. It was sick, chaotic green. And standing next to the fire was not a totem. It was Philomena Frosthall. The high priestess turned, a smile stretching her withered face. She held a staff made of twisted bone, pulsing with the same green light as the fire. "I knew you would come, Ambrose," she crooned. "You always were too sentimental about your ancestors." "Philomena," Ambrose spat. "You betrayed the crown for Vincent." "Vincent," Philomena laughed, a dry, cracking sound. "That preening idiot. No, Vincent is a wallet. I serve a higher power, the void itself." She slammed the staff onto the ground. The green fire flared, forming a wall between Ambrose and the exit. "The Withers was never meant to kill you, Ambrose," Philomena explained, walking around the fire. "Death is too easy. The poison was a catalyst, to hollow you out, to make you a vessel." "A vessel for what?" Marielle demanded, stepping out from behind Ambrose. Philomena looked at Marielle with genuine curiosity. "And you, the anomaly, the waitress who screamed. You ruined the ritual, child. He was supposed to die and rise as a husk. But you tethered his soul back to his body." "And I'll do it again," Marielle said, bluffing with all her might. "We shall see." Philomena pointed the staff at Ambrose. Ambrose roared and lunged, but he was too slow. A bolt of green energy hit him in the chest. He flew backward, slamming into a sarcophagus. He didn't get up. He writhed, clutching his chest as the green light began to snake under his skin. "Ambrose!" Marielle screamed. "He is turning," Philomena said calmly. "The beast is taking over. Once the soul is burned away, only the hunger remains. He will tear you apart, girl. And then he will tear the world apart." Ambrose was growling, a sound that wasn't human, wasn't vampire. It was the sound of a trapped animal losing its mind. His eyes rolled back, turning entirely white. His claws lengthened, scraping sparks against the stone floor. He looked at Marielle. There was no recognition in his face, only appetite. Philomena lowered the green firewall, creating a path. But not for escape. "Go on, my king," she whispered. "Eat." Ambrose crouched, muscles coiling to spring. He was looking right at Marielle's throat. Marielle stood her ground. She dropped the letter opener. It clattered loudly on the stone. She stepped forward, toward the monster. "Ambrose," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "I know you're in there. Follow the lighthouse. The beast snarled, saliva dripping from fangs that looked twice as long as before. He took a step toward her. "Ambrose, look at me!" Marielle shouted. She reached out with her mind, pushing all her fear, all her hope, down the invisible bond that connected them. "Come back." The beast froze. He shook his head, as if shaking off a fly. Philomena frowned. "Kill her!" Ambrose roared, a deafening sound that shook dust from the ceiling. He leaped, but not at Marielle. He sailed over her head, a blur of motion, and crashed into Philomena. The priestess shrieked as Ambrose's claws tore through her robes and into the bone staff. He wasn't attacking her. He was attacking the source of the magic. With a sickening crunch, the bone staff shattered. The green fire imploded. A shockwave of magical force blasted outward. Marielle was thrown back, hitting the wall hard. Darkness rushed in at the edges of her vision. The last thing she saw was Ambrose, standing amidst the ruins of the fire, the green light fading from his veins, looking down at his own hands in horror. Then, the floor beneath them gave way. The explosion had cracked the foundation of the ancient crypt. With a rumble that felt like the end of the world, the floor collapsed into the subterranean river below. Marielle fell. Ambrose fell. And the darkness took them both. The world was cold, wet, and smelled of ancient stone. Marielle coughed, expelling water from her lungs. Her entire body ached. She was lying on a bank of coarse black sand. The roar of a river echoed in the distance, but here the water lapped gently against the shore. "Ambrose!" she rasped. The name tore at her raw throat. There was no answer. Panic, sharp and immediate, flooded her system. She sat up, fumbling in the pitch darkness. Her hands brushed against wet rock, driftwood, and then velvet. "Ambrose!" He was lying half in the water, his body tangled in the shredded remains of his funeral cloak. He was ice cold. Not the cool temperature of a vampire, but the deep, unnatural chill of a statue in winter. Marielle dragged him up onto the sand. It took every ounce of her strength. He was dead weight. "Wake up," she pleaded, slapping his cheek. "You don't get to die in a cave. That's a cliché." He didn't move. There was no breath, no pulse. The bond, the lighthouse hum in her head, was silent. She pressed her ear to his chest. Silence. The fall had killed him, or the water, or the magic. "No," Marielle whispered. Tears hot and angry spilled down her cheeks. "No, I did not fight a high priestess for you to drown." She remembered the crypt. You tethered his soul back to his body. If blood was the battery, maybe the connection was the jump starter. Marielle placed her hands on either side of his face. She closed her eyes and focused. She didn't reach for magic. She didn't have any. She reached for him. She remembered the way he looked at her in the solar, the anger in his eyes when he defended her, the loneliness she had felt through the bond. "Come back," she commanded in the silence of her mind. "I am here. Find me." Nothing. She leaned down and kissed him. It wasn't romantic. It was desperate. A breath of air into still lungs, a plea, a spark. It started in her chest, a sudden flare of heat, and rushed outward. She felt it pass through her lips and into him. Ambrose gasped. He arched his back, water spilling from his mouth as he coughed violently. The sound echoed like a gunshot in the cavern. "Breathe," Marielle sobbed, rubbing his back. "Just breathe." Ambrose collapsed back onto the sand, shivering uncontrollably. Cold," he chattered. "So cold." "I know," Marielle said. She looked around. Darkness. No wood for a fire that wasn't waterlogged. "My blood," Ambrose stuttered. "It's dormant. The cold slows the flow." He was going into hibernation. If he fell asleep now, his heart would stop again, and this time she might not be able to restart it. He needed heat. Marielle didn't hesitate. She lay down on the sand beside him. She pulled the sodden, heavy velvet cloak over both of them, creating a cocoon. Then she wrapped her arms and legs around him, pressing her warm, human body against his freezing one. "What are you doing?" he whispered, his teeth chattering. "Saving your unlife," she muttered, shivering as the cold from his skin seeped into hers. "Sharing body heat. It's basic survival." "It is improper," he murmured, though he buried his face in the crook of her neck, seeking the warmth of her pulse. "You bit me 3 hours ago," Marielle retorted. "We're past improper." They lay there in the dark, the sound of the underground river rushing by. Slowly, the shivering subsided. Ambrose's skin began to warm, stealing heat from hers. "I lost the signal," Ambrose said quietly, his voice vibrating against her collarbone. "When we fell, I thought I was gone." "You were," Marielle said. "I called you back. I heard you," he confessed. "It wasn't a voice. It was a gravity. You pulled me out of the void." He lifted his head slightly, trying to see her in the gloom. "Why, Marielle, I am a monster. You saw the beast in the crypt. That is what I am. The king is just a mask. The beast saved me," Marielle said softly. "The beast attacked Philomena, not me. Even when you were a monster, you protected me." Ambrose was silent for a long time. "I have been king for 200 years, he said. "I have conquered kingdoms. I have burned cities. But I have never been trusted. Feared, yes. Worshipped, sometimes. But never trusted." He tightened his arms around her. "If we get out of here," he whispered, "I will rewrite the laws of this kingdom. No more purges, no more fear." "First we get out," Marielle said, her eyelids drooping. The exhaustion was claiming her. "Then you can do the paperwork." "Sleep," Ambrose commanded gently. "I will watch the dark." And for the first time in history, the vampire king kept watch while a human slept in his arms. Not as prey, but as his savior. They walked for hours. The underground system was a labyrinth of bioluminescent fungi and slick rock. Ambrose was recovering, his night vision guiding them through the treacherous terrain. He held Marielle's hand constantly, pulling her over ravines and steadying her on slippery slopes. "Where does this river go?" Marielle asked, her voice echoing. "It feeds the castle cisterns," Ambrose said. "Ideally, if we follow the current upstream, we should find the intake pumps. And if we find them, we're still miles underground." "There are maintenance shafts," Ambrose said. "The Greyhaven ancestors built this castle on top of a dormant volcano. These tunnels, they are the veins of the mountain." They turned a corner and stopped dead. They weren't in a tunnel anymore. They were in a colossal geode. The walls were lined with crystals the size of houses, glowing with a soft, purple light. And in the center of the cavern sat a structure. It wasn't built. It was grown, a twisted spire of obsidian and bone, rising from a lake of still black water. "The foundry," Ambrose whispered, staring at it with wide eyes. "I thought it was a myth." "What is it?" "The place where the first king made the pact," Ambrose said, walking toward the water's edge. "The birthplace of our line. Legend says he traded his mortality for the strength to save his people from a plague. So the vampire curse is a vaccine." "A desperate bargain," Ambrose corrected. He pointed to the base of the spire. There, etched into the obsidian, were runes glowing with the same sick green light they had seen in the crypt. "Philomena," Ambrose growled. "She didn't just tap into the crypts, she tapped into the source." Marielle squinted. "There's something on the altar." Lying on a slab of stone at the base of the spire was a golden chalice. It was overflowing with a thick, black liquid. The withers, Ambrose realized. It's not just poison. It's corrupted blood from the source. She's poisoning the lineage at the root. If we destroy it, Marielle said, does it stop the cloud in the castle? It should sever the link, Ambrose nodded. But touching the source, it requires a sacrifice. Blood for blood. He stepped forward. I have to do it. I have to drink the corruption and burn it out with my own blood. You'll die, Marielle said, grabbing his arm. You're barely standing. If you drink that, it will finish what the poison started. It is the only way. No, Marielle said. She looked at the chalice, then at the runes. The runes are logic gates. It's a spell, but it works like a circuit. Look. She pointed to the flow of the green light. It's a loop. It feeds on itself. If we break the circuit, the energy dissipates. We can't break obsidian, Ambrose said. We don't have to break the stone, Marielle said, pulling a bobby pin from her messy hair. She walked to the altar. We just have to bridge the connection. Short-circuit it. Marielle, no, that energy will fry you. I'm a human, she said, looking back at him with a grin that was terrified, but brave. I'm an insulator. Magic doesn't conduct through me the same way. Before he could stop her, she jammed the metal bobby pin into the groove of the rune, connecting the input line to the output line. Crack! A spark of white light exploded from the rune. The green glow flickered, then strobed violently. The bobby pin turned red-hot, burning Marielle's fingers. She yelped but didn't let go. "Hold it!" she screamed. The feedback loop intensified. The green light turned blinding white. The chalice began to vibrate. Ambrose didn't watch. He grabbed Marielle and threw himself over her, shielding her with his body as the altar exploded. The shockwave knocked the wind out of them. Shards of obsidian rained down. The black liquid in the chalice vaporized, turning into harmless grey steam. Silence returned to the cavern. The purple light of the crystals stabilized. The sick green glow was gone. Ambrose lifted his head. You, he breathed, looking down at her. You short-circuited an ancient blood curse with a hair accessory. Marielle blew on her burned fingers. My father was a physics professor, she said shakily. Magic is just energy with an ego. You just have to know how to ground it. Ambrose laughed. It was a full, rich sound that bounced off the crystals. He pulled her up and kissed her, hard, joyful, and full of life. I am going to make you a queen, he swore, or a goddess. Whatever you want. I want a nap, Marielle said, and a sandwich. Done, Ambrose promised. He looked toward the far wall, where a draft was blowing the steam away. The ventilation shaft. It's open. The poison is clearing. He took her hand. His grip was strong again. The destruction of the corruption had lifted the weight from his soul. Let's go home, he said. And take out the trash. The sun set as they emerged from the ventilation shaft into the royal linen closet, sooty but alive. The castle was silent, but Ambrose heard heartbeats in the great hall. They found the doors barred. Ambrose shattered them with a single shove. Inside, the court knelt in chains, surrounded by mercenaries, while Vincent sat on the throne, the crown of Nightcrest in one hand and a goblet in the other. You're late, Vincent called out. I told them you died a hero's sacrifice. They know the truth, Ambrose said, looking like a wreck but radiating menace. Vincent held up a blue vial. Do they? I have the only antidote to the secondary decay. He's lying, Marielle shouted, stepping forward. We destroyed the source. The curse is broken, Vincent sneered. Kill the girl. Ambrose's shadows lashed out, darker than the room. Touch her, and I will flay your minds. The mercenaries froze, sensing a predator far beyond their pay grade. Cowards, Vincent spat, drawing his silvered sword. He blurred forward, but Ambrose caught his wrist mid-swing, cracking the air. You never learned leverage, Ambrose said calmly, sweeping Vincent's legs and slamming him to the marble. He placed a foot on Vincent's chest. Do it, Vincent goaded. Prove you're the monster. No. Ambrose stepped back. I am done with fear. Captain Tanith, arrest him. Tanith stood up, grinning through a bloody lip. With pleasure. Vincent laughed manically, pulling a detonator. If I don't win, no one does. He clicked the button repeatedly. Nothing happened. Looking for this? Celestia Lakewood called from the balcony, holding a bundle of wires. I don't like it when people try to blow up my shoe collection. Vincent's face crumbled before Tanith knocked him out cold. The room erupted in cheers. Ambrose ignored them all, scooping an exhausted Marielle into his arms. Is it over? She mumbled. Yes. He kissed her forehead. The funeral is officially cancelled. The coronation of King Ambrose was held. It was different. The doors of the cathedral were thrown open to the city. Humans and vampires stood side by side. The sun-blocking spells on the windows were adjusted to allow a soft, filtered twilight, a compromise between day and night. Marielle stood on the balcony, watching the city below. She wore a dress of silver silk, not a uniform. She wasn't queen. She had refused the title, saying it sounded like too much work. She was the royal advisor, the liaison to the human districts, and, unofficially, the only person allowed to tell the king to shut up. Ambrose stepped up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. He looked healthy, strong, and for the first time, at peace. Regretting the promotion? He asked. The benefits are good, she smiled, leaning back against him. But the boss is demanding. He is deeply in love, Ambrose corrected, turning her to face him. And he owes you a sandwich. You still haven't paid up on that. I have a lifetime to make it up to you, Ambrose said. He kissed her, and as the bells of Nightcrest rang out, signaling a new era, Marielle realized that the scariest thing in the kingdom wasn't the monsters. It was the love that could bring them back to life. And she wouldn't trade it for anything. Did this story keep you on the edge of your seat? If you fell in love with Ambrose and Marielle, don't forget to like this story. Share it with your fellow fantasy lovers, and subscribe for more tales of romance, magic, and destiny. What should happen in the sequel? Let me know in the comments.